There comes a time when you realize you can't keep lowering your frequency just to have company. Have you ever noticed how people suddenly get offended when you stop pretending to be less intelligent than you actually are? It's fascinating. You don't insult anyone. You don't argue. You just stop dumbing yourself down, and suddenly you're difficult, arrogant, or too deep. It's almost like refusing to play dumb. Feels like an act of rebellion in a world addicted to mediocrity. Studies in social psychology actually show that people tend to dislike those who make them feel intellectually insecure, even subconsciously. In other words, your mere existence can trigger someone's ego without you uttering a single condescending word. That's how fragile most social circles are. You'd think being smart, aware, and self-respecting would be qualities people celebrate. But for the chosen ones, it's the opposite. Your clarity is treated like a crime scene. They don't want to understand you. They want to shrink you to their comfort level. You can literally watch the room tense up the moment you speak from truth instead of trend. And the irony, the same people who secretly Google what you just said will later accuse you of thinking you're better than everyone. No, Sandra, I'm just allergic to conversations about reality TV and recycled drama. But here's the twist. Your refusal to dilute your mind is not arrogance. It's alignment. You weren't born to speak in sound bites. You weren't made to fit into mental cages built by people who fear their own potential. So when they get irritated that you won't dumb yourself down to socialize, it's not because you're hard to understand. It's because you remind them how much they've stopped trying to grow. This is where we dig deep, because today we're going to expose the truth behind why your intelligence, your discernment, and your refusal to conform have been pissing people off since the moment you stopped apologizing for your evolution. Clears throat. Number 1. You're not too much. They're just unused to substance. People don't get angry at you because you're confusing. They get angry because you make them realize how shallow they've become. You walk into rooms carrying depth, and depth has a strange way of exposing what's hollow. Most people build their confidence on group approval, not self-awareness. They survive through imitation, copying each other's opinions, humor, and energy just to stay accepted. So when someone like you walks in, someone who doesn't need to pretend, who doesn't flatter for belonging, who doesn't chase validation, you instantly disturb their social balance. It's not that they hate intelligence, they hate what your intelligence reflects back to them. It reminds them of all the parts of themselves they've silenced to fit in. When you speak truth without sugarcoating, you're not attacking anyone, but their egos interpret it as an ambush. You bring a mirror they never asked to see, and mirrors are rarely comfortable things. It's easier for them to call you too serious or hard to relate to than to admit they've settled for shallow connections because real ones require growth. You're not too much. You're simply operating at a level that forces others to question how little they've been demanding from life. That's why they say you make things deep. No. Clears throat. You just stopped pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. You refuse to laugh at what's toxic, to agree with what's senseless, or to clap for what's empty. The level of honesty doesn't blend well in social environments built on mutual delusion. What they call arrogance is often just authenticity without apology. You're not trying to impress anyone, you're trying to stay real. But to people who've confused blending in with being kind, your presence feels like a threat. They crave simplicity, not because life is simple, but because they don't want to think. They want emotional fast food, not philosophical meals. You serve depth, and they're addicted to distraction. Clears throat, so they get defensive. They start mocking your seriousness, twisting your confidence into conceit. But deep down they know what's happening. You remind them of the standard they abandoned. You remind them of the standard they abandoned. You remind them that small talk can't fill a spiritual void. That's why your presence irritates them. It's not because you're complicated. It's because you expose how comfortable they've become living without substance. Number 2, your intelligence isn't just mental. It's moral. Your intelligence isn't just about how well you think. It's about how clearly you see. It's not limited to information or vocabulary. It's moral, spiritual, and intuitive. You read energy the same way others read words. That's what truly disturbs people. They can handle someone who's book smart, but not someone who's soul smart. When you walk into a room, you don't just notice what people say, you notice what they hide. And that's exactly why some people feel uneasy around you without knowing why. Your intelligence doesn't play along with performance. You can sense when someone's pretending, when kindness is fake, or when motives are mixed. You've learned to see through charm, manipulation, and forced humility. And that's what people find unsettling. They can't mask their intentions around you the way they do with others. You detect spiritual dishonesty instantly, and your calm response to it feels like confrontation. You don't call it out, but the fact that you don't fall for it is enough to make them nervous. People mistake your discernment for judgment. They assume you're too suspicious or hard to please. But what they don't understand is that once you've seen the world without its filters, you can't unsee it. You can't pretend not to notice hidden manipulation just to keep the peace. You can't ignore energy that feels off just to stay liked. Your intelligence operates on a frequency that most people don't want to tune into because it would force them to deal with their own shadows. That's why your presence feels heavy to those who depend on deception for influence. You don't even have to expose them. Your awareness alone ruins the illusion. They can't guilt trip you, gaslight you, or flatter you into submission. Their usual tricks bounce off. You're immune to emotional theater, and in a world that rewards performance over truth, that makes you dangerous in their eyes. They'll say you read too much into things or make everything deep. But the truth is, your insight doesn't come from overthinking. It comes from clarity. You just see life without the noise. And people who thrive in confusion can't stand that. They're not mad because you think too much. They're mad because your mind exposes the lies they've learned to live with. Number 3, you're not antisocial. You're anti-pretense. You're not antisocial. You're just tired of pretending to enjoy things that drain your spirit. People love to throw labels like distant, cold, or unapproachable at you. But what they really mean is that you don't fake connection to feel included. You don't laugh at jokes that carry hidden cruelty. You don't nod along with conversations built on gossip, jealousy, or ego. You crave truth, depth, and authenticity. And because most people fear those things, they mistake your silence for arrogance. But you're not avoiding them. You're avoiding the emptiness they've normalized. You've reached a point where meaningless interaction feels heavier than solitude. You can't sit comfortably in rooms where everyone's performing a version of themselves they don't even like. You've outgrown the need to blend in. And that's what unsettles people. They can't understand why you're okay sitting alone when the crowd is available. They don't realize solitude is your sanctuary, not your punishment. You've learned that your peace is worth more than forced belonging. What most call socializing, you see as spiritual negotiation. Every exchange costs energy. And you've learned to be careful where you spend it. You've realized some conversations don't build you, they bury you. Some people don't listen to understand, they listen to compete. You've stopped showing up to places that leave you emptier than you arrived. That's not withdrawal. That's self-respect. You simply stop paying emotional rent in spaces that don't nurture your growth. People get uncomfortable around someone who doesn't need noise to feel alive. Your stillness exposes how restless they are inside. You don't fill silence with filler talk, and that makes them panic because silence forces truth to surface. They want entertainment. You want evolution. They socialize to escape themselves. You disconnect to rediscover yourself. The difference threatens them because it challenges their definition of normal. You're not antisocial. You're just anti-pretending. You crave realness in a world addicted to performance. You don't seek attention. You seek alignment. And while others waste energy fitting in, you conserve yours for becoming. The truth is, you're not rejecting people. You're rejecting the version of yourself you used to be when you needed their approval. That's not pride. That's freedom. Number 4, you terrify people who depend on ignorance for power. You terrify people who depend on ignorance for power because your awareness dismantles the very illusions that keep them in control. Most social and professional hierarchies survive by keeping people uninformed, distracted, or emotionally reactive. The moment you step in with clarity, you shatter the spell. You see through their manipulation, and they can't stand it. They rely on confusion to maintain superiority. But you refuse to play dumb, and that's what makes you unmanageable. People who thrive on control hate those who can't be easily baited. They're used to using guilt, charm, fear, or authority to get their way. But you become immune to emotional blackmail. You've seen too much, learned too much, evolved too far. You can sense when someone's trying to play games with your empathy, and you quietly refuse to participate. That refusal doesn't just frustrate them, it exposes them. Because without someone to manipulate, they lose relevance. Their power has always depended on keeping others beneath them in awareness. And when you rise above that, they start panicking. Your intelligence isn't threatening because it's loud. It's threatening because it's calm. You don't argue, you just understand. You don't attack, you just see. And people can't fight what they can't confuse. You become the one person in the room they can't psychologically disarm. It's not about arrogance, it's about integrity. You simply refuse to be ruled by lies. And in a world where most people sell their peace for acceptance, that level of inner authority looks like rebellion. You expose the imbalance in systems that pretend to be fair. You reveal the manipulation hiding behind rules, the control disguised as tradition, and the deceit wrapped in good intentions. You don't buy narratives, you question them. That's dangerous to anyone who profits from blind obedience. You don't seek conflict, but your clarity creates it, because truth naturally disturbs everything built on falsehood. They call you difficult, rebellious, or arrogant, not because you are, but because they can't deceive you. You've reached a stage where your awareness is protection, not pride. You've outgrown their tools of control, and they hate that you can't be colonized by fear or ignorance. That's why they're uncomfortable around you. You represent a freedom they can't fake. Number 5. Your depth makes their masks malfunction. Your depth makes their masks malfunction because you don't respond the way they're programmed to expect. Shallow people depend on emotional reactions. They need outrage, defensiveness, guilt, or validation to keep control of the conversation. You don't give them that. You observe, you study, you understand. And in a world addicted to noise, being unbothered is power. Your calmness forces them to face the emptiness behind their performance. When you don't react, their script loses its rhythm. They can't manipulate someone who sees through the stage lights. People who thrive on chaos always assume control lives in the loudest voice. But your strength lives in composure. They can't provoke you, and that unsettles them. They'll try sarcasm, guilt-tripping, emotional guilt, even fake vulnerability, anything to get a reaction. But you don't bite. You already recognize the pattern. Clears throat. You know the difference between someone expressing emotion and someone using emotion as a weapon. And the moment you stay centered, their tactics lose power. Your peace becomes their mirror, and it shows them how much of their identity depends on creating disorder. They misread your self-control as indifference. But it's not that you don't feel, it's that you refuse to let feelings be used against you. You've learned that most people don't want resolution. They want an audience for their dysfunction. And when you don't provide it, they feel exposed. Your awareness highlights their lack of depth. Your stillness turns into a spotlight they can't hide from. You don't call them fake, but your energy says it for you. It's not even about moral superiority. It's about emotional maturity. You've learned that reacting is handing over your power. Responding from understanding is reclaiming it. So when people try to provoke you and fail, they don't just lose control of the situation, they lose control of the mask. You make pretense uncomfortable. Your clarity doesn't just disarm them, it dismantles them. They can't play victim, hero, or manipulator around you because you see all three masks at once. That's why your peace feels offensive to them. Your calm isn't passive, it's disruptive. Your depth destabilizes the performance that shallow people live by. And when their masks slip, they realize too late you were never playing their game to begin with. Number 6, they mistake your independence for superiority. They mistake your independence for superiority because most people can't tell the difference between confidence and defiance. You're not trying to prove you're above anyone. You're simply trying to live in truth without compromising yourself. But to those who depend on collective agreement to feel relevant, individuality looks like an insult. When you make decisions without consulting the crowd, it exposes how deeply they rely on external approval. Your self-direction threatens the system they've built their identity around, one where belonging is earned through sameness, not authenticity. You've learned to stand alone without making noise about it. You don't chase validation, and you don't need a chorus of approval to confirm your worth. But that quiet strength irritates people who only know how to exist through comparison. They can't understand how you move without reassurance, so they label it arrogance. In reality, it's not pride, so it's peace. You've simply reached a place where your conscience weighs more than people's opinions. That's freedom. But to the insecure, it looks like rebellion. People who think in groups can't stand individuals who think for themselves. Your ability to disagree without hostility short-circuits their social wiring. They need collective agreement to feel powerful, and your independence denies them that comfort. When you don't join their gossip, mimic their lifestyle, or echo their opinions, you expose how much of their personality is borrowed. They mistake your authenticity for isolation because they've confused conformity with connection. What really irritates them is that you don't crumble without company. You're fine eating alone, working alone, growing alone, and that defies everything they were taught about self-worth. In a culture where popularity equals validation, your self-sufficiency looks dangerous. You represent what they secretly crave, the ability to be free without applause. And because they can't comprehend it, they criticize it. They'll call you proud, distant, or difficult. But deep down, they know it's not pride keeping you apart. It's purpose. You're not avoiding people, you're avoiding dilution. You don't crave the herd's comfort because you've learned that most groups demand the death of individuality. You're not superior, you're simply sovereign. And that's the kind of peace the insecure can't interpret without feeling attacked. Number 7, you're proof that evolution can happen without permission. You proof that evolution can happen without permission because your growth didn't come with an audience, a teacher, or a title. You didn't need a degree in self-awareness or a certificate in transformation. You grew in silence. Through pain, through loss, through moments no one even noticed. And that unsettles people who believe growth must be supervised. They've been taught that wisdom comes with endorsements, that enlightenment needs validation, that you can't evolve without someone signing off on your progress. You shattered that belief just by existing. Your evolution didn't come from workshops or approval. It came from surviving the unexplainable. It came from nights you questioned everything and rebuilt yourself from the inside out. You didn't have a mentor cheering you on. You had divine intervention teaching you directly. That's what irritates people who worship systems over substance. They can't process how you carry understanding that wasn't given by them or measured by their standards. You're proof that God still teaches in secret. The truth still finds its way to those who seek it sincerely, and that no human gatekeeper owns access to awakening. People who crave control hate when someone like you bypasses their structures. They depend on the illusion that authority decides who's worthy, that evolution is a reward, not a revelation. You ruin that fantasy by simply growing without their help. They can't take credit for your progress, and that frustrates them because it exposes how much of their own wisdom was built on validation, not transformation. You became living evidence that the source doesn't need middlemen. What makes your growth even more threatening is that it's authentic. It wasn't curated for attention. It was carved out of struggle. You didn't evolve to look enlightened, clear as throat. You evolved because survival demanded it. And now you walk in a kind of quiet knowing that can't be taught, only lived. That's what makes people uncomfortable. They can memorize what you embody, but they can't reproduce it. You're not arrogant for growing beyond what they expected. You're just living proof that true evolution is clear's throat, personal, unpredictable, and unstoppable. You didn't wait for permission because your soul understood something they forgot. Evolution isn't granted. It's chosen, and you chose it long before they believed you could. Number 8, your self-respect is a threat to their dependency. Your self-respect is a threat to their dependency because you've proven that peace can exist without an audience. You no longer chase attention, approval, or inclusion, and that breaks the unspoken rule of social survival. Most people are trained to confuse being liked with being safe. They'll say yes when they mean no, agree when they disagree, and laugh when they're uncomfortable. All to maintain connection. You stop doing that, and that's what makes you dangerous to the insecure. You're living proof that fulfillment doesn't need permission and that truth makes them uneasy. You've chosen peace over popularity, and in a world built on validation addiction that feels like rebellion, you don't compromise your boundaries just to avoid being misunderstood. You don't apologize for protecting your time or saying no. That kind of self-respect is alien to people who've been conditioned to trade authenticity for acceptance. They depend on others to tell them who they are. And when you refuse to play that game, it reveals how empty their identity really is. Your stability reminds them that their peace has been outsourced, and they hate being reminded of that. They can't manipulate you through guilt because you stop seeking approval. They can't control you with exclusion because solitude doesn't scare you anymore. You've learned that being alone isn't the same as being lonely, and that discovery liberates you but terrifies them. Their entire self-worth is built on belonging to circles that drain them. You broke that cycle, and your freedom exposes the weakness in their dependency. To those trapped in people-pleasing, your independence looks selfish. They don't understand that self-respect is not ego. It's emotional adulthood. You no longer hand your peace to anyone just to keep the peace. You don't beg to stay where your spirit isn't welcomed. And that kind of integrity unsettles people who measure love by how much they can control someone. You become the walking contradiction they can't decode. Calm without company, joyful without validation, grounded without approval. Your existence alone challenges their entire belief system. They call it pride, but it's actually healing because you've discovered what they still fear to learn. That peace isn't something people give you, it's something you stop letting them take. Number 9. They can't bond without belittling. They can't bond without belittling because for most people, mockery has become the glue that holds their relationships together. Their version of fun often depends on tearing someone down, even themselves. The sarcasm, the fake laughter, the gossip disguised as banter, it's all a way to avoid depth. It's not real joy, it's shared insecurity. They pick targets, make jokes at others' expense, or trade self-deprecating humor just to feel connected. It's emotional cannibalism, devouring others' dignity to feed their sense of belonging. But when you don't join in, you expose how twisted that kind of bonding really is. You don't find weakness entertaining because you know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of ridicule. You've seen how laughter can hide cruelty. You understand that most funny people aren't actually confident. They're just scared of silence, scared of sincerity, scared of being seen without armor. And when you don't play along, when you choose empathy over mockery, they start squirming. It's not because you're boring, it's because you make them aware of how mean they've become. Your refusal to participate ruins the game. You don't gossip. You don't entertain cruelty disguised as honesty. You don't join group teasing just to look relaxed. That makes you the unspoken conscience of the room, and that's a role no one wants to face. You don't have to lecture them. Your silence does it for you. The moment you don't laugh at someone's pain, they feel the weight of what they said. You turn the mirror back on them without even trying. To people who bond through negativity, kindness looks like judgment. They'll call you uptight, distant, or too sensitive. But what they really mean is, you won't make cruelty comfortable anymore. You've outgrown that form of connection because you crave something real. Laughter that doesn't humiliate. Honesty that doesn't wound. Friendship that doesn't feed off someone's embarrassment. The truth is, most people don't know how to connect without competition. They use mockery as currency. But you've stopped trading in that economy. You'd rather stand alone in truth than laugh along with cruelty. And that's what unsettles them most. You remind them that what they call fun is really just disguised fear, and you're no longer willing to join in. Number 10. You refuse to translate your brilliance into mediocrity. You refuse to translate your brilliance into mediocrity because you've spent too long dimming your light just to make others feel safe in their shadows. You've learned that watering yourself down doesn't create peace. It creates resentment. Every time you simplified your thoughts, every time you softened your insight just to avoid intimidating people, a part of you felt smaller. Now you understand that doing that isn't kindness, it's self-betrayal. Your mind, your awareness, your originality were hard-earned through struggle, loss, and growth. Why should you apologize for the very qualities that pulled you out of darkness? People like to pretend it's humility to hide your greatness, but what they really mean is conformity. They want you to speak in small words, think in small ways, and live within small expectations because your presence challenges their comfort zone. They don't hate your intelligence, they hate what it demands of them. To understand you, they'd have to expand, and that takes effort. It's easier to label you intense or too much than to admit they've stopped stretching their own minds. Your brilliance isn't just intellect, it's perception. You see life from angles that others refuse to look at. You process truth at a depth that most people avoid because it forces them to face themselves. When you express that depth, it doesn't make you superior. It just means you're fluent in the language they've forgotten, the language of authenticity. And because they can't translate it, they twist it into something threatening. But you've reached a point where you won't dilute your message to be digestible. You're not rude for speaking clearly. You're not arrogant for knowing your value. You're simply done pretending to be confused to make the blind comfortable. You'd rather be misunderstood for your truth than celebrated for your silence. The irony is many of those who resent your brilliance secretly wish they had the courage to shine as you do. But imitation requires transformation, and transformation requires humility, something they resist. Your clarity exposes their laziness. Your originality exposes their imitation. That's why they call you different with disdain. You're not refusing to fit in out of pride. You're refusing to shrink into someone you no longer are. You're not hard to understand. They just don't want to grow enough to meet you where you are. Number 11, you're not lonely. You're an intellectual quarantine. You're not lonely. You're an intellectual quarantine. And that distinction matters more than people think. You didn't withdraw because you're cold, antisocial, or bitter. You withdrew because constant exposure to surface-level energy started to infect your clarity. You realized that not every conversation feeds you. Some deplete you. Some people don't talk to understand, they talk to drain. And when you began to notice how heavy your spirit felt after being around certain individuals, you knew it was time to protect your atmosphere. You're not hiding, you're detoxing. You're cleansing your environment of people who confuse connection with consumption. Because truthfully, most of what passes for bonding today is just emotional leeching. People unloading chaos without ever refilling peace. You got tired of having to shrink your insight just to keep the room comfortable? You got tired of sitting at tables where depth was treated like danger? So you left, not out of arrogance, but preservation. This solitude you've chosen isn't a punishment. It's refinement. You're learning to hear your own frequency without static. You're discovering what your energy feels like without other people's projections attached to it. You're realizing that peace isn't found in people. It's maintained in boundaries. That's what they don't understand. You're not antisocial. You're selective. You'd rather have a quiet mind than a crowded room full of shallow noise. People mistake this quarantine for loneliness because they can't comprehend a life not powered by validation. They need to be seen to feel real. You only need to be aligned. While they chase attention, you're nurturing awareness. And in that process, your vibration is recalibrating to something few can touch or even understand. You're not avoiding people, you're allowing only truth to reach you. So yes, you may walk alone for a season, but that isolation is your incubation. The same way doctors protect the healthy from infection, you're protecting your consciousness from contamination. You're not detached from humanity. You detach from the illusions that keep humanity asleep. One day when your frequency fully stabilizes, you realize your quarantine wasn't isolation at all. It was protection. It was preparation. It was your spirit saying, before you share your light again, make sure it's pure. Number 12, you're a mirror they didn't consent to look into. You're a mirror they didn't consent to look into. And that unsettles them more than anything you've ever said or done. Your presence doesn't just show them you, it shows them. It reveals the cracks in the persona they've worked so hard to maintain. You don't have to correct, criticize, or even hint at their inconsistencies. Your very authenticity pulls back the curtain on their performance. Suddenly, all the shortcuts, the lies, the excuses, and the false humility they've built their identity on become visible, not to you, but to themselves. And for someone who's made an entire life out of appearances, that's terrifying. They feel judged because in your company they can't escape their own reflection. You're not projecting anything onto them. You're just standing firmly in who you are. That stability makes their shifting masks obvious. When you don't take the bait to flatter their ego or participate in their games, it interrupts the feedback loop they rely on to feel righteous, clever, or superior. Without that loop, they're left with nothing but the truth about themselves. And most people aren't prepared to face that truth. You don't condemn them. You don't need to. Your authenticity does all the work. It's not even intentional, it's energetic. When you've done the work to align who you are with who you appear to be, you naturally shine a light on the areas where others are fragmented. That's why they get defensive or even hostile around you. It's not you they hate. It's the part of themselves they've been avoiding. You've essentially become a silent referee in a game they're losing against themselves. Every word you speak from clarity sounds like a whistle on their foul play. Every boundary you set feels like a penalty on their manipulation. They can't control you, so they try to discredit you. They can't outshine you, so they try to dim you. But none of it changes the fact that in your presence, their masks malfunction, clears throat, and deep down, even if they resent you for it, you're the proof they could also live authentically if they had the courage. Number 13, your detachment is a superpower, not clears throat, a defect. Your detachment is a superpower, not a defect. And deep down they know it. They call it coldness because they can't comprehend a connection that isn't rooted in need. They've been conditioned to believe that love equals constant access, that friendship equals unfiltered availability, and that validation equals belonging. So when you stop playing by those rules, it looks like rejection to them, but it's actually freedom for you. You've stopped trying to fit where authenticity can't breathe, and that is something few people ever dare to do. You learned that proximity without alignment is poison. Just because someone is near doesn't mean they're good for your spirit. Just because they call it a bond doesn't mean it's not a chain. You began to see how many so-called relationships were built on obligation, emotional blackmail, or unspoken contracts. I'll feed your ego if you feed mine. Once you noticed that pattern, clear as throat, you couldn't unsee it. And that's when detachment became not just a choice, but a lifeline. Your refusal to chase proximity with people who drain your essence is an act of divine rebellion. It's you saying, I will no longer invest my peace into people who profit off my depletion. You're not rejecting connection, you're rejecting corruption. You're not dismissing love, you're dismissing its counterfeits. That's what they can't stand. You've exposed the hollowness of relationships built on performance, guilt, or manipulation by simply walking away from them. You're no longer seduced by access. You crave alignment. You no longer view being let in as a privilege when the space itself is toxic. You'd rather be at peace on your own than popular in an environment where your essence is slowly dying. This terrifies people who equate belonging with self-betrayal, because you've proven that fulfillment without their approval is not only possible but powerful. That's why they're mad. You don't beg for entry into prisons they call friendships. You don't accept invitations to tables where the price of admission is your self-respect. And without even trying, you've become the living proof that freedom doesn't come from more connections. It comes from better boundaries. In a world addicted to attachment, your detachment is a revolution. Number 14, you're not avoiding people. You're preserving frequency. You're not avoiding people. You're preserving frequency. And that distinction is what most can't grasp. In a culture where constant access is equated with kindness, stepping back is seen as arrogance. But you've learned through experience that every interaction has a cost. Every conversation is a transaction of energy. Words aren't just sounds, they're carriers of vibration. They shape mood, thoughts, even the way your body feels after you leave a room. Some people don't just talk, they siphon. Some environments don't just drain, they dilute. And over time you begin to see the pattern. Your spirit felt bankrupt after spending too much time in the wrong frequencies, so you became deliberate. You started treating your attention and your presence like currency. You realized not every invitation deserves an RSVP, and not every person deserves an open channel. This isn't about elitism, it's about stewardship. You're not hoarding your energy. You're protecting it from inflation, from being spent on interactions that yield nothing but exhaustion. Just like you wouldn't pour your savings into a failing business, you no longer pour your intellect and empathy into conversations that strip you of clarity. This choice unsettles people because it forces them to confront how careless they are with their own energy. They mistake your discernment for judgment because they've never learned to value their frequency. They've normalized being drained. They think tolerating low vibrations is connection. But you've learned that lowering yourself to fit in doesn't help anyone. It just keeps everyone stuck. By preserving your frequency, you're actually preserving your ability to give, create, and show up authentically when it truly matters. Your refusal to engage isn't arrogance. It's energy economics. It's you choosing high-return interactions over high-drain ones. It's you saying no, not because you dislike people, but because you love yourself enough to not go spiritually bankrupt. And in a world where constant noise is the norm, your silence becomes not an absence, but a signal. Your peace has value. You're not avoiding people. You're mastering the art of choosing who, what, and where your energy will multiply rather than disappear. What we've explored today is not just a list of observations. It's a revelation about why you, the chosen one, operate differently from everyone around you. Every point, from refusing to dumb yourself down to preserving your energy, is connected by a single thread: authenticity. You are not flawed for standing apart. You are not cold, distant, or difficult for refusing to play by the rules of mediocrity. Every moment you've chosen integrity over approval, depth over distraction, and alignment over access. You've been building a life that the unprepared can't comprehend. That's why your presence disrupts, your clarity unsettles, and your independence terrifies those addicted to surface-level thinking. The truth is, the world has never really known what to do with someone like you. People are conditioned to fear reflection, to depend on conformity, and to measure worth through approval. You, however, exist outside of that system. You've evolved without permission. You've preserved your frequency, nurtured your self-respect, and refused to dilute your brilliance. That refusal is not arrogance, it is responsibility. You are the walking, living proof that depth, awareness, and spiritual evolution cannot be regulated by social norms, institutions, or shallow expectations. You become a mirror for everyone who tries to pretend, a quiet force exposing manipulation, superficiality, and emotional dependency. And yet you move through all of it with a clarity that makes your presence not just noticeable, but unforgettable. The resistance you feel from others is not a reflection of your inadequacy. It is a reflection of their fear, their unawareness, and their inability to meet you where you stand. They want you to shrink, simplify, and perform, but you have learned that growth, peace, and evolution demand courage, discipline, and alignment. Every choice you make to protect your mind, spirit, and integrity is a testament to your strength. You are not a product of their approval, nor a participant in their illusions. You are an example of what happens when someone refuses to compromise on truth, clarity, and self-respect. So own it. Every boundary, every moment of detachment, every choice to stay true to yourself is part of your power. And as you continue to walk this path, remember the discomfort others feel around you is proof of your alignment, not your fault. You are not here to fit in. You are here to rise, to evolve, and to shine in ways they cannot yet comprehend. If this video resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more insights that challenge, awaken, and empower. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video with those who need to hear the truth today. Every interaction spreads awareness, and together we raise the frequency of those ready to embrace their authenticity. Stay aligned, stay powerful, and never settle for anything less than your truth. God bless you.